Aloha and welcome to Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute. At the Institute, we believe in individual liberty, free markets, and limited accountable government. One of the ways we keep our government limited to what it should be doing and accountable is by getting involved as citizens. Unfortunately, in the 50th state, our voter turnout is so low that we rank near the bottom of the entire United States in terms of electoral involvement. That's why it's very important not only to change that, but also to be involved between elections. There are people who are out there day in and day out trying to make Hawaii a better place by keeping our government accountable. And I'm meeting with a couple of them today because they care deeply about the environment. They malama the aina, they take care of the land. They've been involved in doing this for a long time, but more than that, they line up with one of the principles that we hold very dear at ThinkTech Hawaii and at the Grassroots Institute, and that is power to the people. A government in which the people are the rulers, the leaders, and the government is at the service of the people. And that can only happen when we're involved and when we're active. So I'm very proud to be able to be with two very well-known activists today. Tom Iwai is the treasurer of Save Our Kakaako, and we also have Ron Iwami, the president, with us today. And they're going to tell us a little bit about how they got involved in this movement, what it's all about, how to keep power with the people. And so I welcome them today. Ron, welcome to our program today.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Well, so good to have you today, Ron. And
Yeah.
Tom,
Thank
good
you
to
for
have
having
you.
us.
And I want everybody to see, if you look at the camera, you've got your Friends of Kewaloand's t-shirts on.
Yes.
I'm a big fan. I didn't get a t-shirt because you gave me a bumper sticker. So recently I went to Maui and I wore your bumper sticker.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
There's
Thank
another group there called the Friends of Kanaha, and they were so thrilled to learn about you. You're like their big brother that they're trying to imitate.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. Now, you go way back. Your roots are with a very famous movement called Save Our Surf, back when Magic Island was considered for a site for hotel development, and a group came together and in the 60s and in the 70s decided to save all of these very special places for surf and for recreation and agriculture and so forth. How did you get involved, Ron, in becoming an activist?
Well, actually, I don't really want to be called an activist.
All right.
But
Good.
I look at myself as the voice of the people, because Friends of Kewaloand represents a community there, and we express the community's voice out there. So, because kind of activist is kind of like, has that derogatory tone to it.
Well, I love
Yeah.
Friends.
Yeah, Friends.
Friends of the people,
Yeah, that's
Voice
what-
of the People, Friends of Kewaloand.
Yeah.
That's a lot more friendly.
Yeah, that's why I want to tone it down.
There you go. So when you're coming at the legislators with the signs and everything, you're saying, we're your friends.
Yeah, exactly. And Keli'i, I think that really helped us, because all through our, rallies and our march to the Capitol, we never shouted any obscenities.
That's wonderful.
We used our T-shirts, our signs as our voices, and we were very quiet. Yeah, and I think that's what helped us to be successful.
How about that? Ron, how did you get involved?
Oh, Tom.
Tom, how did you get involved? Tommy, why?
Well, when I heard about the issue with Ron for Friends of Kewaloand, I was a supporter as far as what was happening in Kakaako Makai. Very concerned about residential development
Yes.
in 2005, 2006. And from that point on, I guess, I became more and more involved until I, decided to help get more involved with Friends of Kewaloand.
Well, that's what brought our paths together ultimately. In 2012, when the Office of Hawaiian Affairs began to pursue its plans for development of the Kakaako Makai area, and eventually we all sat down together and hit it off right away.
Yeah.
Because we believe in power to the people. But we'll talk more about that story. Both of you are retired state workers, is that right? What was your field, Ron?
Actually, I retired from
City and County.
Honolulu Fire Department, City and County. of
Okay,
Honolulu.
there you go.
So this October made 5 years, and I was my last station was Waikiki Station as the
How
captain
about
there.
that?
Yeah.
Captain, fire captain.
Yeah.
So you've retired from a career in the Honolulu Fire Department.
Yeah, 28
Well,
years.
Thank you for serving. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Tom, how about you?
Yeah, well, I spent about 36 years with the Division of Aquatic Resources, Department of Land and
Wow.
Natural Resources, as an aquatic biologist, and primarily involved with aquaculture development.
How about that?
Within the state. And so I was very fortunate, and there was my job, and I had a good mentor that believed in helping people, helping the farmers, helping to try to develop a new industry in Hawaii besides, tourism, pineapple, sugar at the time.
Well, I think that's important for people to know that you both are retired professionals and managers, that you've had high levels of responsibility, you've worked with government, so you're not simply, camping out down there at Kewalo's and trying to protest. You're actually people who have been part of building the system. But I have bad news for you.
What's that?
Your pensions have already been spent by the government, so we're going to have to tax your grandchildren.
You mean the ERS fund?
Yes, the unfunded liabilities. But that's for another show.
Well, I got to go back to work.
In the meantime, let's save Kakaako. And that's an important topic. But before we get to that, you introduced me when we first met, Ron, to some of the values of SOS, that movement, Save Our Surf, back in the 60s and 70s when people were trying to protect Magic Island from development. And you actually wrote a book that uses some of those principles and applies them to Kakaako. Let me show everybody that over here. It's a Save Our Kakaako, and operators are standing by. First 1,000 people who call. But we'll tell you at the end how to get this. But I noticed an area over here in which you talk about some of the principles that you followed. What is it all about, trying to make change?
Well, Save Our Surf, SOS, as it's more commonly known as, was started by John Kelly Jr. back in the early 60s. And their mission was to protect surf sites, thus the name, Save Our Surf. And I wasn't involved in that time, but I knew of them. But when development was going to come to Kewalo's, that's what prompted me to seek their advice, because they've been through it. And through George Downing, one of the original founders, he advised Friends of Kewaloand how we can do it. And some of the principles are listed in the book.
Well, let me take a look at these over here. In fact, they're in an original book, Turning the Tide by John Kelly, that described the Save Our Surf method, and you both are using that method at Kakaako to fight against unwarranted development. Well, let's talk a little bit about it. Here's the first one, and Tom, maybe you want to comment on this. The first principle is movement activists, but I suppose you call them friends now. Movement activists must have genuine love for the people and a deep respect for the intelligence, regardless of their age, class, culture, ethnic background, or level of education. So this idea of really loving people, really respecting them, is at the heart. What is that? How is that applied in saving Kakaako?
Well, if you look at the call it the clientele that surf out at Kewalo's, that area, it comes from all walks of life: professionals, semi-professionals, blue collar, white collar, and it's like a family out there. Everybody wants to enjoy, relax, and the ocean and the surfing is one of those activities that provides that release from stress, work stress, family stress, problems. It's a good mechanism and a healthy lifestyle. Yeah.
Well, I really sensed that when I visited you at your office.
Oh,
which
yeah.
was really a picnic table out there.
Natural air conditioning.
But, you have a community. And so this first principle of respect is so important. And it's like Ron was saying, why you don't like the word activist, because that's offensive in many ways. That's frightening in many ways.
Yes.
But you really want what you do to be an extension of love and respect for other people. Here's the second principle you've got in here. The movement must arm itself with the facts, avoid all fabrications of half-truths, and communicate the truth to the people. So how do you do that with the Kakaako movement?
I think
Kewalo?
that was one of the first pieces of advice George told me, where I called him up cold. I didn't know him, but a friend gave me his number. And he told me, Ron, the first thing you need to do is educate the people. And you must educate them with the truth. Because once you give them false truth, they will not trust you anymore. So it's very important that you educate them with the truth. And I think that is what we're doing now with some development coming to Kewalo Basin. We're educating the people right now what's to come. And I think that's very important, because if you don't educate the people is not going to know why we are mobilizing,
That's right.
why we are fighting, why we're protecting. Yeah. So it's an important step, and to do it with the true facts will build your reputation or trust with the people.
That's right. And that was part of our own discussion when we were talking about the development on Kakaako Makai. There's so many things people didn't know, but the facts make a difference. For example, on the Makai side, where the Office of Hawaiian Affairs wanted to develop and have towers that are twice the height of the exemption or the rules,
Limit, yeah.
very few people knew that that's state land that belongs to the people, and the people should have a voice in that. It changes it all of a sudden when people realize that's our kuleana.
Right.
So facts make a difference.
Right, it does.
And, good. Well, that's what we believe at the Grassroots Institute. Here's a third principle, and I really like this. Drawing upon its experience, the movement must then help the affected and aroused people to consolidate their power base and develop an overall strategy and appropriate action. Consolidate their power base, develop an overall strategy and appropriate action and an appropriate action program. That sounds very sophisticated. It doesn't sound like ranting and raving. It doesn't sound like making noise. It sounds like being very, very specific about what you do so that you get results. Tell me a little bit about that. How's that taking place?
Well, one of the first things you have to realize is that many of the, let's say, supporters of Friends of Kewaloand
Right.
Are working people. And as you know, in Hawaii, it's hard to make a living, support your family, especially if you have to fight traffic, staying 2 hours in traffic, going home,
That's
coming
right.
to work and all that. Okay, so we realize time is not always available to all of us. Unfortunately, like Ron and I are retired, that we have the option to do certain things that we're very concerned about. So that's one thing. The power base, I think, is not necessarily in numbers, but is in will of certain individuals or core like that. When we hold rallies, at times, we don't know how many people are going to show up, but we know that if they can make it, a lot of them will show up. And they do. They do, because they're concerned. If they can spend a half hour during their lunch hour, they'll come down and participate in a rally at the Capitol, for example. Or if they can stay longer, then they'll stay longer. Okay.
So you have to understand who you have working for you, with you,
Yes.
and build the movement around their lifestyle so that it fits even their time availability.
Yeah, and even then, if we're not sure, we do the best we can. You know, that's all we can do. That's all I think we hope for. That sure, it would be nice to have 2,000 people at the Capitol, but if we had 20, you know, that's great. You know, it would be nice to have more, but we understand that people have to work. You know,
what is one of the most powerful ways of consolidating this power base and using that, you're leveraging your power? What have you seen really work, either of you?
Well, I think what Ron had, you know, by educating the public. Some of the public may not be our supporters, but if you provide them with the facts, they can make an educated determination of, you know, whether it's appropriate or not.
Yeah, and then they come on board once they get the facts. So I think, you know, with the principles of Save Our Surf, with the part of respecting people first and loving one another, and then educating them, and then organizing, it all falls into place, because before you can even educate or talk, you must have trust. And if you build that trust from the first stage of respect and love, it flows, and then it educates. Once they educate, they have the facts, and then you organize. So it's pretty simple, those 3 steps. Simple, but to me, we believe in it, and it worked when we fought for Kewalos.
You know, one of the criticisms that is often raised against activist groups, people say this, and I don't mean anything disrespectful by it, but a lot of times we'll see this with the Super Ferry or with other movements. People say, oh, those activists are from the mainland. But it sounds that you've described a process that is very homegrown, very much a local process, a process of bringing the people with local values, such as reaching out with aloha.
Right, yeah. And that's what we liked about the Save Our Surf model.
Well, that's wonderful. You know, when I told our receptionist today that I was going to be interviewing these 2 fellas, Ron and Tom, and what they did, she immediately said she knows who they are and wants to see the show because they really get the job done. They're responsible for hundreds of people in the streets. And so, you know, what they're talking about is real. When we come back, we're going to focus in on one area, and that is the Kakaako development, especially the ocean side of Ala Moana Boulevard. What that is all about, whether that's the will of the people, and what Save Our Kakaako is trying to accomplish. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. I'm interviewing today Save Our Kakaako, Ron Iwami and Tom Iwai, just great friends. Aloha.
This is Alice Lee Hagan, host of ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My show here at ThinkTech Hawaii is every Thursday from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. I bring in interesting guests from Hawaii, the mainland, and hopefully international guests in the future. Do join us on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Carlos Juarez, and I host Global Connections here on the ThinkTech broadcast series. We broadcast live every Thursday from 2 o'clock and also on Olelo 54. Please make sure to tune in and join us. We'll see you there.
Aloha and welcome back to Ehana Kako. We're a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Ehana Kako. That's like a pule kako. A pule kako is let's pray together. Everybody knows that. So at the Grassroots Institute, we decided to say, in addition to that, Ehana kako. Let's all work together, as opposed to not work together. Working together to produce a better government, society, and economy. And that's one of the reasons that I like the people at Friends of Kakaako, especially Ron Iwami and Tom Iwai, because they're all about uniting Hawaii's people to work for something better. And that's why they actually prefer the name Friends rather than the term activists. We're going to talk about a controversial area, in fact, one in which we kind of met each other, the Kakaako Makai development. Well, remember that, guys, sitting there near the beach? At your office, the picnic table there. And I had become deeply, deeply concerned about what the Office of Hawaiian Affairs was doing. This whole area, Kakaako, has a portion of 31 acres that belongs to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. And they spent the last legislative session trying to get an exemption to the height restriction of 200 feet so they could build 400-foot towers right there on the ocean side of Ala Moana Boulevard. And there are many private developers. There's Hughes Corporation, there's the Bishop of State Kamehameha Schools. But I got concerned because the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is actually a state agency. It's your land, it's my land, it's our land, it's everybody's land. And I had a question for you, and that was whether the people really want to have that kind of development. Have you done any kind of survey or outreach? Can you tell what the will of the people is about Kakaako Makai?
Oh, well, before we go any further, the exception that OHA was asking was not only to increase the height from 200 feet to 400, it was the exception to allow them to build residential. Because right now there is a law that was passed in 2006 as a result of our battle in the book.
Sure.
And the legislators passed a law that says no, you cannot build any residential in Kakaako Makai, and you cannot sell any public land. This was previous to before OHA got the land. So now OHA is asking for exception to the no residential ban. And they want to build residential, and they want to build it tall.
Well, thanks for clarifying
Yeah,
that double whammy, because
Yeah,
it's
it's
not
double.
only going to be something that affects the visibility of the ocean, it's also going to be something that affects the use of the land, because SOS, Friends of Kewaloand, Friends of Kanaha, other groups care deeply about our oceanfront's use reserved for park space, for recreation, for surfing, for Hawaiian practices such as fishing and so forth. Okay, so what is the will of the people? If we talk about power of the people, do people want this development here in Hawaii or not?
Well, I think a perfect example is going back to Magic Island. When you look at Magic Island like that, people currently, thousands of people, residents and tourists alike, enjoy the area, fishing, swimming, diving, jogging, walking, just enjoying the panoramic view like that. Well, at one time, the state had these grandiose plans of putting an amusement park on Magic Island, and also to destroy offshore reef sites 1 mile toward Kewalo Basin. At that point, this is when Seba Surf said, wait a minute, something's not right here. The public didn't have any input. Well, they rallied the troops. Basically, the public went down to the Capitol, and basically, because of power of the people, was able to stop it. And to this day, this is why when you look at Magic Island, you can see Diamond Head. Okay, what OHA has proposed in terms of this last legislative session to get an exemption to build these high-rise residentials, and they're saying, don't worry, you will have access. What essentially you will create is a concrete canyon similar to what you find in Waikiki. Now, if you talk to the community, you talk to the public, they say, we don't want that. We don't want that. Okay. Also, they're saying we will have access. Okay. But frankly, being in government for many, many years, maybe this administration will say, yes, there will be access. Maybe the next administration may say, well, we will restrict it. And pretty soon, it'll be another Waikiki, where you can't really park anywhere. You can't have easy access to the shoreline, unless you can afford the high parking rates like that. Okay. So you see what happens in Waikiki now. We don't want it to come to Kakaako Makai.
Now, one of the criticisms that can be leveled against people who oppose development is that they oppose all development, but that's not the case here. I think
No.
you as an organization have recognized there's a difference between the development on the ocean side of Ala Moana Boulevard
Yes.
and on the mountain side, and there are aggressive plans for the development of Kakaako Mauka in terms of, at this point, I think we're looking at over 35 buildings that are being planned so far on that side, in that part of the town, Kakaako. But your organization has not taken aim at stopping that. Do you want to explain that, perhaps, Ron?
Okay, well, we decided, the group decided to focus on the Makai side because that's what's true to our hearts. We want to keep the ocean side for the public, for the people to use. So being focused, we felt that we were stronger, and we did what we did in 2006 and passed the law, and we felt with the law behind us, we have a chance. Whereas on the Mauka side, there is no law, and that's why they're building. And with ACD in control, that's part of the equation too. So we did testify, though, even though our focus is Makai, we did testify at public hearings regarding Mauka early on, and basically we told them, we feel that the Mauka development is happening too fast. It's done irresponsibly and not smart growth. We are not opposed to anti-development, or we're not anti-development. We would like to see smart development, and we feel that's not being done. So we did testify in that fact.
So your concern about Kakaako Mauka, the mountainside, the large number of buildings and so forth, high density. Your concern is more for responsibility. Are we making that place a livable place? Are we making that place sustainable? Are we making that place something that doesn't damage what we value here in Hawaii? But you're not opposed to development in and of itself.
I guess I have a more cynical view than Ron. That's why he's president, and we need him. Okay.
And that's why you hold on to the money as the treasurer.
Yeah, I look at what's coming to Kakaako Makai, and I'm saying 30,000, projected 30,000 new residents coming to the area by the projection 2020, 2025, like that. And yet you look at the planning for that area. Where's the open space? Where's the schools? Where's the parks? Okay. If you don't have that, where are the people, the residents going to come? Makai. Okay. So I look at it cynically. Some people may consider that the state has literally screwed up Kakaako Makai. Don't screw up Kakaako Makai. We will fight for it to keep it open space for the people and hopefully for perpetuity.
In other words, Tom, you're saying that with the density planned for Kakaako Makai, it becomes even more important that the Makai oceanside be untampered with, that be left as open space for the people. Otherwise, we're going to really have a concrete jungle. And
you notice, when we say we're not for the Kewalo surfers, it's for everyone, the people of Hawaii. So we have also a lot of support from other islands too. That we were surprised that.
Well,
wow.
Yes, the other islands care about this deeply. Yeah. But who knows? Maybe you could forge a real good deal with the Kakaako Makai developers by being the people who take care of their playground.
Yeah.
Because the people who live in those condos are going to have children, or they're going to want to take strolls in the evening and so forth, and
they're going to use it.
All the greater value of Kakaako Makai, which raises a very important issue here. You're not advocating, then, I take it, for just one group, such as the surfers per se. You're not just advocating for the nature lovers. You're advocating for all of the people and a responsible development in all of Honolulu.
Yes.
Well, I tip my hat to you. One of the things that reminds me of is your choice of the word friends rather than activists. I like the word activists from time to time. We should scare our government.
Right.
We shouldn't be afraid of our government. Our government should be afraid of us. But friends does bring along the public a lot more. And I'm hearing now parts of your story that I didn't quite hear so fully before. You may have already presented that and so forth, but what I'm hearing now is you're making a case for non-residential development and open space on Kakaako Makai based upon the growing needs of the Makai side. They're going to need that space, and that seems to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, the development on the Makai side, that's a recent happening.
Yes.
It reinforces what we started in 2006 of keeping it open space, no residential. And so I think that plays into our favor. But I wanted to take this time to tell about the Kakaako Makai Conceptual Master Plan.
Yes.
It is a plan that was a result of the People's Movement in '06. And it basically was created by the people, everybody from normal surfers like us, the general public, developers, the government. We all sat at the table for 4 years and came up with this plan. And that plan was adopted officially by HCD in 2011 as a guide to develop Kakaako Makai. But we see, so that plan doesn't show any residential development.
Well, we'll come back and hear more about it. Don't spoil it for us.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Because-
Maybe I jumped the gun.
I want to find out what happened to the will of the people
Yeah.
that has really moved you to arms now.
Yeah.
We'll take a short break and come back and see what has happened to the conceptual master plan that was the voice of the people at one time. Is government listening to people now? I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute, interviewing our friends of Kewalos, Ron and Tom, and we'll be back right after this short message. Don't go away.
Hi, I'm Jay Fidel, CEO of ThinkTech. On Thursday, December 11th, we're having our annual reunion party. We call it ThinkTech United. It's at the Laniakea YWCA. It's for our speakers and hosts and moderators and friends. Please come down. Everybody is invited to be united. We'll see you there. Check our website for details. Aloha.
Welcome back to Ehana Kako on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I am so grateful to Jay Fidel, our producer here, and to the wonderful staff and team that put our programs on every week. ThinkTech Hawaii puts everything that we record into a podcast format that you can download at the thinktechhawaii.com website. So I encourage you to go there. And we produce about 20 to 30 hours of live work every week here from the beautiful studios in downtown Honolulu. So I hope you'll visit us sometime. Now we're going back to Tom Iwai and Ron Iwami, who are with Friends of Kewalo, and we have a cliffhanger. They told us, you told us the people came together and created a master plan. 4 years of work went into it. Citizens, government, professionals, architects, everybody came together, and by the time we get to 2012, is that the key year?
2011.
2011, everybody says, yay, we're all Ehana Kako, we're working together, and then what does government do? What's the rest of the story?
Well, ACDA adopted
The Hawaii Community Development Authority, HCDA.
And what that meant is
They even adopted it.
Yeah, they would use that as a guide for any future development
All right.
of Kakaako Makai to avoid the controversy that happened in 2006. So
What were some of the features of that plan that were agreed to and adopted by the HCDA?
Well, it starts with a vision statement, which is the people's gathering place. It
How
was the
wonderful.
all-encompassing statement, and it comes with 14 guiding principles, and it's listed in my book too,
All right.
in the appendix.
That's right.
But the guiding principles basically say it's supposed to be used for public use and not private. So there's no
So that was agreed
residential
upon.
plans. Yeah, and the state spent $600,000 of state money to create that plan, and now in 2012, OHA got the land, and initially they met with us because they knew of our connection to the place, and we told them, oh, we have this plan, and we hope that you follow it. And at that time, they said they know of the plan, and they will, put a lot of weight to it.
So the people's will had already been expressed. And then the government in 2012, and a little background here is, decides to try to settle a debt it has with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and runs out of money, basically. We don't have any surplus cash.
200 million supposed
And
to be.
so that debt, which could be close to between $800 million and $1 billion, is the claim from the ceded lands revenue. Instead of giving cash, the state decides to take from that land. And some of that land happens to be right there in Kakaako, the 31 acres, that are right there in the area that the master plan was talking about, the area that said, we're not going to have residential development. So they asked you first, though, didn't they? Didn't the governor and the legislature call you up and say, those of you who worked on the plan with HCDA, do you mind if we change it? Did they do that?
No.
No, they didn't.
No, they didn't.
They didn't ask.
well, they did hold a charrette.
That's right.
Which was more,
But for the most part, government just went ahead with ignoring the will of the people and saying, we're going to give this land to OHA, which, by the way, some people think that's a problem. Some people think that it's revenues from the ceded lands that can go to OHA, not the actual land, but we'll leave that for those other people to think about on another show. But beyond that, so they give it to OHA to do with what it will, And OHA comes in with immediate plans to develop it fully, to develop it according to a principle called best and highest use.
Yes.
In other words, the most dollar value that can come from that investment, which would mean high rises with expensive condos and so forth. So, well, how do you feel about that? The government decided to violate this agreement.
Well, this is a perfect example, as I alluded to earlier, about one administration may agree to something, next administration comes in and flips it. Okay, so it's ideal and it's good to trust your government, but always keep an eye on the government, verify what's happening. And this is where the public, especially the younger generation, have to realize you have to keep your eye on the government because of this kind of situation that occurs. Okay, so because if you don't, then can you imagine the concrete corridor being built along Kakaako? That's the future that awaits the future generations.
Now, when this happened, and the legislature decides to approve the plan to give this land to OHA, did any legislators react? Did the governor react and say, wait a minute, we already have an agreement as to how this land can be used?
No, in fact, Governor Abercrombie was pushing the land deal. And like what Tom said, when this plan came out, I think, was it still Lingo as governor, or Abercrombie was still there?
And so,
but see, the different administrations,
yes,
they don't know about the plan, and then they do this deal.
Because they don't read the newspaper, right? No, but the point I'm trying to make is this. Nothing would be happening were it not for a group of citizens reacting. Were it not for Friends of Kewaloand and some other people who stood up and said, hey, wait a minute, our government is pulling the wool over our eyes. And this is a testament to how important it is to have people watching our government, holding our government accountable. Can you imagine if you guys weren't doing this and everybody was just saying, let it happen?
We would have a concrete corridor coming right now.
Right now?
Yeah, I can tell you that.
Well, and this is just very, very fascinating. Now, where do we go from here? 2012 has come and gone. We're now at 2014, entering a new legislative session. In 2013, you made enough noise, a whole bunch of people made enough noise, so that the legislature wasn't inclined to grant OHA its request to build and double the height. But they're going to be back again. So what's the plan? What's the game plan?
Well, I think we
Unless you don't want to tell them.
No.
No, we're transparent and open.
Yeah. Currently, like, we've been having meetings with OHA, either consultants regarding the development of Kewalo Basin and all that. Again, we relish the opportunity to provide input, community input, to the plans anyway, okay? But yet, we see changes within the guiding principles, changes within the plan that the state has invested over $600,000 in. So the big question is, of course, why create the plan if you're not going to follow it? Why spend taxpayers' money, $600,000 that could be used for other purposes, worthwhile purposes, if you're not going to follow the plan anyway? Okay, we don't want this plan to be put on the shelf like typical state studies that nobody reads. So we hope that the next administration, the current IGA administration, would seriously look at it and try to follow along that. As we said before, we're not against development. I think, what we're for is responsible development, okay? Case in point is the Kewalo Basin Harbor. Howard Hughes has a contract in terms of fixing the slips, adding additional slips, repair, and all that to make it suitable more for the recreational boaters, commercial fishermen and all that. But just my personal view, I think would be a better approach to have a more comprehensive look at Kewalo Basin instead of what HCD is doing is what I call chop suey development, where you have incompatible proposals being put out instead of one comprehensive look at what Kewalo Basin Harbor would be of greatest benefit to the people of Hawaii. Yeah. To me, it makes more responsible and makes more sense. But hopefully, with the new administration, that they will seriously look at it differently from the way the current thinking of HCDA.
Have you thought who is behind the push for development? Who, if the people were behind the original master plan that said we want the ocean side to be without development, who's behind pushing that plan aside? Is our government itself just committed to development, or are there special interests that are behind this?
I think it's special interests, yeah.
Particularly the developers.
Yeah, because it all comes down to money, that's what I think. But you know, getting back to your question about how we move forward,
Yes.
and OHA is coming back in 2015 to ask for the exception again. My question to OHA would be, if you're going to ask for exception, what has changed from 2012 when the people stood up and we stopped the exception? What has changed from 2014 when the people stood up again and stopped the exception? Now you're coming back 2015. This will be the third year that the legislators, the people, and everybody would have to tackle this issue. So it's a legitimate question. What has changed in your proposal? And that's the question I want to ask OHA at this time. Because why waste people's time and money after 2 tries because of the public's will to keep this place for everyone and not privatize it by building private residences?
Do you gentlemen feel that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs has an obligation to take the public's view into consideration because it's a government agency?
Well, absolutely. They should. They're a government agency. And the government, I mean, is supposed to be for the people, by the people.
We recently had our elections, and OHA trustees were up for election. Many people did not understand why it is that everyone votes in the OHA election. They do take care of benefits for Native Hawaiians, but they certainly have a scope and impact upon society that is much bigger than Native Hawaiians. And how did you find people open to the idea that they have a responsibility to vote in the OHA elections? Were most people just not aware of that?
My perspective is basically a lot of the OHA elections, whether they were aware or not that they could vote, they weren't familiar with all the candidates. And it basically, I feel, went by name recognition. If they saw an individual's name more in the papers or whatever, or the individual walked the streets or whatever campaign, they have a better chance. Okay. But very few, I think, felt any tie to it. Part of the reason is because OHA has not defined, in my view, what is Hawaiian. Who is a Hawaiian? Okay. Ron and I, for example, grew up in Hawaii. Okay. I may be of Japanese ancestry, but I consider myself a native Hawaiian, born and raised in Hawaii. Okay. American first, Japanese American.
Well, with that note, we need to conclude our show. But what you've both just said could be the basis for another show.
Oh, okay.
Ron, Iwami, I want to thank you
Keli'i.
so much for your dedication to building a better Hawaii and protecting what we have.
Well, thank you.
Tom, Iwai, thank you as well. I
Thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
us, Keli'i.
These are terrific guys, Friends of Kewaloand, who are making it possible for people in Hawaii to stand up and speak truth to our government. Just love what they're doing, and I hope you get behind what they're doing. As you heard, they're not anti-development at all. They care about responsible growth, and if we are going to have development to meet the affordable housing needs of all people in Hawaii, we're also going to have a place where they can play, and hopefully that'll be on our ocean front. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroot Institute on Ehana Kako, and we'll see you next week. Aloha.